A hot day in the Lone Star State, and the sport's most popular driver returns to victory lane like he never left. Hey there, race fans. It's Race Day Top 5 with me, Frank 5. Texas Motor Speedway. It's hot, it's slick, and it can be very treacherous for the drivers. Ever since we reconfigured this racetrack in 2017, it has been a very interesting track that has provided a lot of fun, entertaining restarts, but a lot of guys driving on the edge. And we had a lot of that yesterday, but one driver came out on top, breaking a long winless streak and returning to the top in victory lane. Let's get into all that went down in the Lone Star State. Number 1. Elliott breaks the drought. Chase Elliott returns to victory lane for the first time since the fall of 2022 at Talladega, breaking a 42-race winless streak. He captured yesterday's Autotrader EchoPark Automotive 400 at Texas Motor Speedway, beating out Brad Keselowski, William Byron, Tyler Reddick, and Daniel Suarez for the victory in a race that ended under caution after the original guy in second place, Ross Chastain, got turned on the backstretch, bringing out the caution and thus ending the race. What a big day for Chase Elliott and the 19, returning to victory lane. Again, he had not won a cup race since 2022 in the fall at Talladega, and that win helped propel him further into these playoffs for what was a mediocre playoffs for them at the time, because they weren't really performing well at most of the races like they were earlier in the season. They made it to the championship four because of all the wins and the bonus points they accumulated, but it was kind of a rough stretch for them. And of course, we all know the story for Chase Elliott last year. He started out the season, with a wreck at Daytona, then a nice runner-up at Fontana. Then we go to Las Vegas, and just a couple days prior to that, he went snowboarding, and he broke his leg and had to miss the next 6 races, which put him in a big hole points-wise. But then he came back at Martinsville with a 10th place and was able to have a couple of nice runs and make up some of those points. Then it all came to a halt when he was involved in an incident in the Coke 600 with Denny Hamlin. He wrecked, they retaliated, and that got him a 1-race suspension the next weekend. He came back and was still making up some of those points, but it was just too little too late, and he wasn't able to get to victory lane. Despite coming up short of a few races, it wasn't enough for the 9 team at Chase Elliott. They, despite having a decent average finish last year, he didn't make the playoffs and didn't visit victory lane whatsoever. But this year was a big turnaround, hopefully, for this number 9 team with Chase Elliott and Alan Gustafson trying to get back to form the way they used to be. The start of the season has been pretty decent for them with, a couple of nice runs in the top 15 and top 20 at times, but the last couple of weeks, they've really gotten their act together with a top 10 at Bristol. Should have had a top 5 at Coda, but what can you do when he got loose and cut the corner there? Then he had a 5th place at Richmond, a 3rd last week at Martinsville, where he could have had a good chance of winning, but yesterday, they finally put it all together. Now, they started 24th in this race, so Chase Elliott and the 9 team had a ways to go, but when everybody was starting to make green flag pit stops, Alan Gustafson told Chase, let's stay out a little longer and extend the stint and hope for a caution. They got a break when Jimmy Johnson got spun around in turn number 4 when the car got loose, and Chase came on the radio and said, for the first time in 9 years, which is, his 9th year in the Cup Series, that's like the first biggest break we've had when it comes to strategy, and it played out in their hands because they were able to gain some of that track position and they're able to get some stage points. I mean, they had a good top 5, top 10 car all day yesterday. I mean, they ran up there. The lowest they got after that drive position that they gained from the first stage green flag pit stop sequence until the caution came out was 14th. I mean, they stayed up there all day long. They definitely had some speed in their car, but with 33 laps to go, he made an amazing pass 3 wide to the inside of Tyler Reddick and Denny Hamlin and took the lead. I mean, he was very aggressive on these restarts against some of the guys he was going head-to-head with for the victory yesterday. Then he got passed by Denny Hamlin with 20 laps to go, and it looked like, he was just going to maybe ride back there and hope to maybe get a little bit of tightness back in the car and chase down the 11 car if it had went green the rest of the way, or he could have finished runner-up. But then a caution came out for Ricky Stenhouse Jr. backing into the turn 2 wall. We had a restart, and Elliott just by inches got ahead of Denny Hamlin at the scoring loop when a caution came out from behind for Kyle Larson spinning around. Elliott got the lead. Then on the next restart, he was challenging with Denny Hamlin for the win and trying to slide up in front and clear the 11 car through 3 and 4. The 11 car behind him got in the dirty air, got loose, went around and hit the wall, bringing out another caution and setting up an overtime restart. Then we had another overtime restart where Elliott was still ahead of the 1 car of Ross Chastain, but there was a wreck right behind him. Then on the final restart, which Alan Gustafson told Chase, it was the last restart we could make it on fuel, because they were pretty close to not making it the rest of this race if the overtimes that we kept extending to. But they were able to get it done in the last overtime restart where they took the lead briefly, lost it on the backstretch with Ross Chastain as outside, but he got a nice side draft. Again, he was so aggressive on those restarts yesterday. You could tell he wanted this win badly. He wanted to get back to victory lane. He wanted to make his fans proud, and he gave it his best yesterday, taking the lead from Chastain and holding it off of turn 4, coming to the white flag, and right there with the gap he had, you knew the race was basically over. And it was officially over when the one car got bumped from behind on the backstretch into the wall, bringing out the caution and thus ending the race and getting Chase Elliott back to victory lane for the number 9 team. And also, he had Hooters on his car yesterday, and it is the first time in 32 years that Hooters on a car has visited victory lane. Yes, they've been a sponsor with Chase Elliott since 2017, but they haven't been able to get to victory lane together with Hooters as the primary sponsor on his car in the races that he had it on in the races that he ran it on. But yesterday, they were finally able to break the curse, and in honor of Hooters and the last driver to win with the Hooters Hooters colors in Alan Kulwicki, he did a little bit of a Polish lap celebration instead of a burnout after winning yesterday's race. I mean, he didn't go backwards, like back the car backwards. He did it like, you know, it's just an honoring everybody with a ceremonial victory lap, honoring Alan Kulwicki and the legacy he had with Hooters. Of course, they won the championship in 1992, beating out Chase's dad, Bill Elliott, for the title that season. But a big win for Chase Elliott and the 9 team, and this win officially locks them into the playoffs. And a lot of people have been wondering, with the Chase Elliott win, I mean, like, is he really back? I feel like he never really left, because, again, last year, even though he didn't make the playoffs and even though he didn't win a race, there were a lot of races where he finished in the top 10 and some races inside the top 5. But yesterday, critical win, obviously, for him to get back to victory lane, but it was critical for him on a 1.5-mile track, because an interesting stat that I learned, Chase Elliott has never had a top 5 on a 1.5-mile track with this next-gen car until yesterday. They finally were able to get a top 5, and it was a bonus, a win, and of course, now they're officially locked in the playoffs, and I guarantee you, there are going to be many more wins coming down the road for this number 19 this season. When Chase Elliott wins, he gets hot, and everybody's going to be going, oh boy, here we go. He's hot, and we got to find a way to try to stop this momentum. But these Hendrick cars lately have just been on a roll. With Larson winning and running well, with Byron winning all these races, now Chase Elliott has broken through the victory lane. That leaves Alex Bowman as the only Hendrick car yet to win, but I still have hope he will get to victory lane this season. So big congrats to Chase Elliott and the number 9 team on returning to victory lane yesterday at Texas. Number 2, Chastain comes up short. Ross Chastain gave it his best yesterday in that one car. It was a very fast race car. Qualified in the top 15 and then got inside the top 10 by the time we got to stage 2 and seemed to have a really good race car, particularly when he got in front in clean air. And at this track, clean air means everything. Chastain held the clean air for the last laps of stage number 2 with a couple, despite challenges from guys behind, he was able to hold off and win stage number 2 and get an extra bonus point to carry him through the rest of the season. And Chastain pretty much stayed inside the top 10 the rest of the final stage. And in those last couple of restarts, he was giving it everything he had against Chase Elliott. I mean, he wanted it badly as much as Chase Elliott did, but the 9 car really was the one who wanted it more because it'd been quite a while. Because Chastain's most recent race win was the season finale at Phoenix last year. But Chastain, all the effort he gave for the 9 car yesterday to try to get by him, he was doing everything he possibly could. On the last lap, he got a little bit high on turn number 2, and William Byron from behind had a big run and couldn't slow down in time because, you know, closing rate, especially here in Texas, when someone makes a mistake, the guy behind gains on you unbelievably. And he got in the back of the 1 car. The 1 car went around and hit the outside wall on the backstretch, thus ending the race under caution. And instead of Chastain possibly finishing runner-up, he finished 32nd with a damaged race car. He politely declined a post-race interview saying he didn't want to talk about it. Obviously, he was a little frustrated about what happened on the last lap. I don't think it was intentional. There was no way that was intentional in the last lap between Byron and the 1 car because, again, the 1 car got a little too high and the 24's got such a big run from behind, you can't really do much when the closing rate is that much. So Chastain ends up with a wrecked race car, sadly, but they had a good race car speed-wise, and it's got to be encouraging for them when we go to the next 1.5 miles, which will be Kansas in a few weeks. But the 1 team gave it their best yesterday, but unfortunately, last lap wreck brings their solid run to an end. Number 3, Contenders falling to adversity. A lot of our drivers that ran up front and led laps yesterday had a lot of incidents that prevented them from winning the race, like pole sitter Kyle Larson, Tyler Reddick, who had a good race car, and Denny Hamlin. Starting things off with Kyle Larson, the 5 car, started on the pole, as mentioned, led the most laps for the early part of the race, and ended up winning stage number 1. In stage 2, he stayed in the top 5 and looked to be one of the best cars. But a freak incident happened under caution, which he wasn't the cause of the caution, but under a caution for another incident, Kyle Larson lost his right rear wheel. It fell off the car under those caution laps behind the pace car. I'm like, how is that possible? How could he not feel a vibration in the car? I mean, he was complaining, thinking, I've got a flat tire. Turns out the entire wheel came loose. And because of that, 2 crew members on Larson's pit crew will not be available for the next 2 races at Talladega and Dover. Now, I don't know if they're going to appeal this. I haven't heard anything from Bob Pockers or anybody on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. But Kyle Larson, unfortunately, after that, kind of bit him the rest of the race because he had a good race car, especially up in the clean air and up running up front with the leaders. But he got back in that dirty air and he had to lose 2 laps in the process because of this loose wheel. He was able to get them all back considering all the cautions we had yesterday. He got back in the lead lap, but he was just stuck back there in traffic. He couldn't go anywhere, mainly because once you lose that right rear wheel, you're dragging the diffuser on the ground, and it can literally maybe damage some of the components under there. So Larson, I think, was kind of running 70% the rest of the race yesterday with a lot of damage done to the diffuser dragging on the ground after that rear wheel came off. The highest he got in the race was to 15th, but of course he was one of the cautions in the overtime, and he had to settle for a 21st place finish. Very unfortunate for what happened to Kyle Larson, because I think he had a car that could have won yesterday or finished inside the top 5. Then we go to Tyler Reddick, who in the final stage, I don't think anybody could have touched him. That car was a rocket ship. I mean, he got to as far as a 6-second lead during green flag conditions at the beginning of the final stage. Once we got a couple of those cautions out of the way and got into a long run, Reddick was gone. It was unbelievably strong. But once again, what kind of caused him in this race is pit crew. They had a slow stop under their green flag pit stop, and that lost him briefly what would have been the lead when things cycled through to Denny Hamlin. And I'm like, this 2311 team has got to find a way to minimize these mistakes. But I think at this point, mistakes on pit road from a 2311 pit crew is par for the course. But despite that, the speed in the 45 car was there. He was able to get back by Denny Hamlin, making up some of the lost time that he had on pit road and losing some of the advantage he had to the 11 car. He got it back by passing him, but then he had those restarts late. He got, sandwiched 3 wide by the 9 car, making the pass to the inside in turns 1 and 2. And then a couple of laps later, Reddick actually got high in 1 and 2 and hit the wall. And I thought the damage was enough to take him out of contention and take him out of a good result. But with the durability of these composite body cars, he actually stayed inside the top 10 and ended up coming away with a 4th place finish. So a good run nonetheless for Tyler Reddick, but you just wonder about what could have happened if they didn't hit the wall, but also maybe they could have had a bigger gap. Again, the cautions really changed the race, and it kind of maybe didn't make the pit crew incident that big of a problem, considering that they were able to get back by Denny, and the cautions, what are you going to do about it? But unfortunately, it cost Reddick a chance to win yesterday, especially with the wall contact late. And then we go to Denny Hamlin, who, as late in the race, in really the whole race, the 11 car was very fast. In the final stage, he was second fiddle to the 45 car of Tyler Reddick, and then once he got past on the outside, once he was able to make the pass on Reddick on that restart with 33 to go, he went back by the 9 car, and it looked like Hamlin was going to win the race, get his 3rd win of the season, but the caution for Stenhouse wrecking in turn 2 came out, and then Chase Elliott got by Hamlin by a few inches before that next caution in 1 and 2 on that restart came out. And then the restart that set up the end of regulation before overtime restarts, he was the one that set into overtime when Hamlin was behind the dirty air of the 9 car who was sliding up in front of him in 3 and 4. Hamlin got in the dirty air and was running over some of those bumps that have begun to develop on this track surface. This continues to get a little bit of age on it, but, a lot of drivers had problems with those bumps yesterday. It got the 11 car, and he went around and hit the outside wall in turns 3 and 4, thus taking him out of a chance to win. But he admitted post-race that he was going for it all and said that Chase Elliott did nothing wrong with how they raced there on that restart before Hamlin crashed. I mean, he was going for everything. He was going for broke, wanted to get another win to add more bonus points to his point total. He didn't blame the 9 car for what he did, which, you know, I think is good considering that they've had a history with each other. It was just good, hard racing, and what happened to Hamlin yesterday, it's how it goes. And unfortunately, that wreck took him out of a chance to win the race and get a solid finish, and he settled for a 30th place run. A lot of guys had good cars yesterday, but some of those 3 contenders had a lot of things go wrong for them and cost them a chance in victory lane. Number 4, Keselowski falls short. Brad Keselowski was oh so close to breaking a winless streak that's longer than Chase Elliott's, but he was so close yesterday. To start off the race, Brad Keselowski fell to the back of the pack like a rock sinking to the bottom of the ocean. That car was not performing well. He nearly got lapped at one point, but thankfully, with all the pit stops going on and the strategy playing out its way, he was able to stay on the lead lap, and they kept working and working and working on that car all race long. And then Matt McCall told Brad to stay up with a few other drivers towards the end of stage 2 to gain some track position, knowing that they would get have a few more laps on those guys that had pitted under the recent yellow prior to that, but they were to be able to be in sync with everybody else once they made their pit stops. Brad got some stage points, and then in the final stage, he came down pit road, got his tires, and started to work his way up further and further through the field. And then when we had the caution late, he was one of the drivers that was staying out, extending the stint, doing what Chase Elliott did early in the race before the Jimmy Johnson spin. Keselowski and the other guys that stayed out caught a break when John Hunter Nemechek crashed in turn 3, bringing out the yellow, and those guys that had yet to pit were able to come down pit road and get a new set of tires. And Brad Keselowski made the most of that call because those 4 tires took him right into the top 5. It took him quite a while to get by the 45 car, Tyler Wright, but once he finally got by him, he was running down the 11 and the 9 car and looked for a moment. If the caution didn't come out for Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Brad Keselowski probably would have passed the 9 car and maybe could have passed Denny Hamlin for the victory. But we'll never know because of what happened to the caution with Stenhouse. Then all those other restarts, Keselowski was one of the big pushers on those restarts like Ross Chastain to the 9 and the 11 up at the front of the field at the time. Brad, I think when we had all those cautions and everybody was starting to slow down, the guys that were on a little older tires than Brad, they were able to kind of cool them down for the most part and stay somewhat equal to the 6 car, despite him being on a little fresher tires than everybody else. At that point, everyone's tires were equal with the amount of caution laps we had. But Brad Keselowski still has got to be very proud of the performance they put together, even though he's a little disappointed that he had to come just that short of breaking the winless streak. It's been 106, now 107 races for Brad Keselowski since he last visited victory lane, which was, believe it or not, like Chase Elliott, at Talladega in the spring of 2021, and he was driving for Team Penske at the time. Ever since he jumped to RFK with Roush Fenway Racing and made it Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing as a co-owner of the team, he's been trying to build that organization back up. The first year he was with the team, it was a struggle, but they started to have some good results at the end of the year, and then last year the whole team stepped up in general, and both cars made the playoffs, with Buescher having multiple trips to victory lane. Brad yet to get to victory lane, but had some opportunities. And so far this year, I mean, they're still running decently. I mean, it's just a matter of putting it all together with a complete race and a fast race car to win. Maybe it happens to him next week at Talladega. Yes, super speedways, I know, but Brad Keselowski always finds a way up at the front at these super speedways, and I can guarantee you he will not be lifting at all next weekend. I guarantee you he's going to be one of the factors and could break his winless streak next week. So a great performance by Brad Keselowski in the 16th, but just fell a little bit short. And number 5, all the chaos at Texas yesterday. I mean, it was bonkers the entire race. I mean, these guys took it smart and conservative at the beginning of the race when they dropped the green flag, because this racetrack is so treacherous. It's like skating on ice out there for these guys. No matter the tire compound they bring, they really had their hands full yesterday. I mean, you couldn't even run 3 wide for 3 consecutive laps. Obviously, it's tough to do in turns 1 and 2 with the banking being as flat as it is and not having a lot of grip in that upper lane. At 3 and 4, you can do it, and it has worked a few times, but we begin to develop a little bit of bumps on these corners, which has kind of made the drivers uneven and upset the car and sent them around spinning, either to hang on for dear life or it backs them into the outside wall. And it happened to a lot of guys yesterday's race. A lot of guys had their hands full. The restarts are very fun here at Texas, don't get me wrong, but once you get a couple laps in and the guys maybe get their hands full, they get into a little bit of chaos and they go around the pack. Like beginning of stage 2, Christopher Bell, who I thought was going to be a factor for the race win or up at the front yesterday, he backed into the outside wall for turn 4, and behind him, Alex Bowman and John Hunter Nemechek got collected. Yet Bell was able to somehow continue. I don't know how, but he did, and he finished 17th. But we had a few other cars. We had Michael McDowell, who was running second to Ross Chastain at one point towards the end of stage 2. He hit the bumps in 3 and 4, and the car went around, backed him in the outside wall. He's done for the race. Then stage 3, Bubba Wallace and Chase Briscoe going for the lead against Harrison Burton at the time. Harrison Burton was the leader. Bubba's going for the lead. He gets a little high. Briscoe behind him. They get up out of the groove high in 3 and 4. Both go around. But they both were able to continue the race and both finished inside the top 10, if you can believe it. But the point is, a lot of guys had their hands full, especially coming off the corners yesterday with those bumps in the upper grooves. Upsets the car and sends them around spinning. I mean, yesterday was a very solid race, in my opinion, for Texas Motor Speedway, considering how it's been since we reconfigured the track. I just wish we would have a little bit more banking back in 1 and 2 like we used to have on the track before we repaved it and did some work on the turns. The 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 back then, you could run anywhere, bottom, middle, high groove. At Texas now, you kind of have to stick to the bottom and hope for somebody in front of you to get high and make a mistake having to get out of the throttle and have everybody behind you come at you like a freight train and go right on by. It's kind of how it is the standard here in Texas. So, again, good racing yesterday, but these guys were running on a very treacherous track that is hot and slippery, and the moment you got up high out of the groove, the moment you ran over those bumps, you were in for some trouble. So that stuff all got a little bit out of hand yesterday. But some guys, despite some of those incidents, were able to recover for some solid results. As mentioned, Briscoe and Bubba had their problems. They were able to recover. Kyle Busch wrecked his car in practice on Saturday, had to go to a backup. We didn't talk about him all day. He came back to finish 9th. And then Carson Hocevar, he was the spinner earlier in the race. He came back and got Spire Motorsports their first non-super speedway top 10 on a 1.5-mile track. I mean, he did a great job. I mean, these guys were able to overcome a lot of adversity yesterday. But a lot of the chaos made it for a lot of interesting and entertaining restarts yesterday at Texas. Now we are off to Talladega Super Speedway, a track that is fast. It's dangerous, and everybody's going to be on the edge of their seats watching these guys run 2, 3, 4 wide at 190 plus miles per hour. The last couple years, the Talladega races have been fairly tame, even with a couple of wrecks. We haven't seen big ones, really, like 10, 15 car pileups there since we introduced this next-gen car. We've had some very solid races the past couple years here at Talladega with this next-gen car. We had the thrilling battle last year with Ryan Blaney storming to the front, coming to the checkered flag to win the race. We have, of course, had him and Elliott going head-to-head in 2022. And we had last year's race, unfortunately, end under caution, but Kyle Busch battling it out with everybody around him to get that victory. This track provides entertainment and excitement for the fans, and I guarantee you next week will be no different than race pass. So will Chase Elliott go back-to-back in races for the first time this year next week? Will Ryan Blaney, the recent winner of Talladega, win there? Will Brad Keselowski break the winless streak? Or will an underdog like a Corey LaJoie, a Ricky Stenhouse Jr. who's won here before, or who knows, maybe Shane Van Gisbergen, because he's in this race driving for Colleague Racing. I don't know what's going to happen next week. All I know is buckle in, folks, because we're going to be in for a show in Sweet Home, Alabama. So I hope you all had a wonderful week, and I hope you all enjoyed the racing in Texas this week. Subscribe, like, and congrats once again to Chase Elliott and the 9 team on their win at Texas, breaking the winless streak. Have a great week, everyone. Let's go racing!